Part 2 of the Twitter files confirming what conservatives knew all along. They were being censored. Journalist Bari Weiss getting her hands on the latest batch of internal documents from the social media giant. And it is damning. The files expose how right-wing commentators were put on secret blacklists that made their voices disappear across the platform. Woke employees prevented certain tweets from trending and actively shadow banned entire accounts and trending topics. Elon Musk says these practices were, quote, enforced against the right, but not against the left. Conservatives who got targeted and Republican lawmakers are calling out the suppression.
They're treating my Twitter account with more scrutiny and censorship than the Prime Minister of Iran, than Hamas, than people that do actual terroristic type damage.
The progressive left in America simply no longer believes in the principles of free speech and free inquiry and open debate. They rely instead on censorship and shadow banning and blacklists.
This is just the start. If you guys think it's just Twitter that's been attacking me, you're delusional.
They got involved in campaigns by doing this. Government used them as another arm using companies to take away people's free speech.
But it wasn't just conservatives. A Stanford doctor who questioned the left's strict COVID measures was, quote, secretly placed on a Trends blacklist. Here's his reaction.
It's ridiculous, and it really hurt public health. If we had an open discussion, the lockdowns would have been lifted much earlier because the data and evidence behind them was so bad. Twitter, by suppressing scientific discussion, harmed science, harmed children, and harmed the American public.
And Twitter executives better lawyer up. Remember when former CEO Jack Dorsey claimed under oath that they didn't engage in some sort of censorship tactics outlined in the Twitter files?
Are you censoring people?
No.
Twitter shadow banning prominent Republicans is bad. Is that true?
No.
Well, here we go. All right, Jesse, I'm going to start with you. It turns out not only was Twitter doing exactly what we thought they were doing, but we've got the FBI intervening on behalf of a Democrat administration in a presidential election. We've got Dr. Bhattacharya, who is giving information that we now know is accurate, who talked about the COVID lockdowns being difficult for children. And now we've got the First Amendment just being totally ignored. We are trending toward a fascist state by the left.
Well, right. So fascism really is when these big corporations align with the political person in charge. You just take the Nazi thing out of it. That's the very definition of fascism. Democracy is a conversation. We debate in this country, we persuade, and then on election day you vote, and then that person's in charge of the country. When you're having a billion-dollar corporation align yourself with the government to poison the conversation, you're poisoning the country. You're interfering in the election, and you're stealing people's votes. You're destroying the will of the people. And I think a lot of people see this story, and it's almost so bad that they can't even really reconcile how bad it is. You know, the Trump stuff, he was like some bot from Russia did this. It was like this. This is massive, Judge. This involves billionaires. This involves the FBI, the CIA, the Democratic Party. And the media in this country is so dead that they won't even treat this like a regular story. This is the biggest scandal that I've ever lived through. And no one in the mainstream media is treating it with any respect. Take away that, let's look at what the children had to suffer through. If you have a legitimate doctor that's been to Stanford Medical School, and you're in a pandemic that we haven't seen in 100 years, and he's trying to give his opinion, his medical opinion about important information to try to save the lives of children, the mental health of children, and that's being censored. That is, you would know better than I would, but can you file a class action lawsuit against Twitter or the FBI for censoring a doctor's medical expertise in the middle of a pandemic?
Well, it gets worse than that, Jesse, because in California, they're trying to take away their licenses. I mean, it doesn't end. And Greg, that's the problem. The left does not see this as a serious issue. They're like, okay, whatever, go on. This is not a big deal. But the truth is that you've got now Adam Schiff on his high horse again, the guy who should be ashamed to even show his face, given he said the Russia collusion was something that he had absolute concrete evidence beyond a reasonable doubt. He lied to the American people while we went after each other. But the truth is, he now wants Elon Musk to talk about what content moderation is he going to have. They won't even address what they've done.
Well, I'm just mesmerized by your wonderful blouse. It's very Partridge Family. Do you remember Partridge Family?
Is this Partridge?
It's very Partridge Family.
No, what about the issues?
Well, I mean, look, I'm just upset that I was not shadow banned. All right, that is it is like, you know, when you play dodgeball, you always try to hit the strongest player. What does Bongino and Kirk have that I don't have? Shadow banning should be a badge of honor. It really should be. But I love how the media totally backed whatever old Twitter did. So when old Twitter said they don't shadow ban, then the media would laugh at anybody who disagreed. They'd call you conspiracy theorists, right-wing nut jobs. Then when it comes out, it's like, oh, that's nothing. That's part of the policy. We have a name for it, magical invisibility. Or they'll come up with a name there. You guys are so silly. And then again, it's to that old analogy that the press goes on strike. And if you cover this story, you're a scab. On Substack, Jim Treacher makes a great point that Musk fired over half the staff and the site's working fine. So what exactly did those people do? They weren't running the site. They were actually running the users, blacklisting, shelving, de-amplifying. Media and Twitter denied it, and then they mocked those who brought it up. That's what they were doing. Imagine if Musk had not purchased Twitter. We would never know this. We would always be gaslit over this. We'd know that it happened, but everybody would make fun of you about it. But now he buys it. We find out about it, and then that understands the spasms of hate directed at him by people like Adam Schiff, who is directing, you know, divisive hate speech, putting Musk's life in danger by coming after him. I mean, I don't know. Can you imagine how much censorship would continue if he hadn't purchased it? And I think what you're seeing, the excuse for deliberately censoring, and then I'll stop, is they brand you a danger. Now, it used to just be about speech, like this is a form of hate speech, disagreeable speech. Now it's disagreeable people. It's hate people. It's not about words. It's like this person's a problem. And now you can, they're literally branding people. And they usually, what is the brand? That you're causing harm to a marginalized population. So a lot of this stuff, take Babylon Bee, got banned because they misgendered Admiral Levine. And that's violence. It's violence.
All right, Jessica. What Twitter did was, in many ways, not only destructive to Donald Trump in terms of the election, it behooved Joe Biden. It was destructive to those people who believe that there were alternatives to what Fauci was saying. And it has harmed the trust that we have in the American government and the First Amendment. How do you defend that kind of behavior?
Well, I'd start by saying that Matt Taibbi nor Bari Weiss have actually told us what the American government asked to have done. Matt Taibbi specifically put in links of what Joe Biden's campaign, so not an elected office, asked to have taken down, but didn't show us what Donald Trump and his administration asked to have taken down, even though he admitted that the government, and that's the one that the First Amendment applies to, had asked to do that. I think the strongest argument that the right or people who think that this is an enormous outrage can make is to talk about scientists, researchers, doctors who want to talk about COVID and what they found, especially the implications for children who have been set back decades from this, had to say. That, I think, is ghastly, and that we should have an investigation into that. That's something that I find offensive. The New York Times even dabbled in talking about it early. There were reports out of Colorado, these huge spikes in terms of kids that were Googling self-harm. And they found that because they had given all the kids these iPads, so they saw what they were looking at, and these kids were deeply depressed, and they needed help, and they weren't getting it. But it is relevant, and I know that it's funny to mock it and say, oh, it was Twitter policy, but it was Twitter policy. So this policy came out in 2018. They talked openly about it. They even briefed reporters on this to the point that Slate.
What are you talking about? Dorsey lied.
That's not
Dorsey
true.
went before Congress
what he-
and lied under oath. That is a crime.
No. What Dorsey did was say that there wasn't anything in excess of the policy on the books, which Slate, a liberal publication, called, quote, Twitter purgatory. And again, Barry Weiss gives us no details as to why Charlie Kirk or Dan Bongino were de-amplified. Tell us exactly what they did. Also,
Yoel wasn't a Trump aider.
That is not because of that. That is because they don't want to show us what was going on. You're telling
now
me
we're going to blame the messengers.
I'm going to blame someone who doesn't give us the full story and claims that she's being an objective journalist.
Okay, and Matt Taibbi too?
Yes, both of them. Both of these substackers who did not have editors for this were handed over private.
Oh, did Twitter have an editor? Give me a break.
What, and Elon Musk's policy, by the way, is now freedom of speech, but not freedom of reach. How is that any different?
Are you kidding? Do you seriously believe?
Do I look unserious to you, Judge?
That what they did was consistent with who we are as Americans, consistent with the Constitution,
that if Charlie Kirk did something abusive, he shouldn't get to sit around and have his tweets amplified to everybody? Yeah.
Go ahead,
Tell me what they did to get de-amplified, Barry Weiss.
I called a longtime tech executive